Hello. Welcome to this edition of the Love and Come Alive podcast. I'm Oscar Crawford. Thank you for joining me. For the past few weeks, I've been talking to you about 8 high-value ways to love and come alive. And from the presentation of the series that would follow, I've talked to you about 3 valuable ways why gratitude creates happiness. Happiness is a condition that most of us aspire to, but as adults we are aware we cannot hold yesterday's happiness to fuel our today. Those things that made us feel good last week are not enough for our today, because today is an entirely new moment. The love we made last night was incredible for last night, but today we will have to find our way again. Our foundations are laid to understand how to be happy, but being happy, believe it or not, is more of a decision than it is something to chase. If we decide that we are happy, we will continue to be happy. We will find ways to express gratitude for being happy, whatever our conditions are. After that, I talked to you about how to effectively manage our unresolved anger. I indicated to you that many of us are carrying around wounds, old wounds that are still bleeding in our minds of events that took place years ago, but we have not managed those moments, and we still have those feelings, and they still affect our behavior with ourselves and other people. So I talked to you about how to effectively manage our unresolved anger, and the primary point was it must be engaged, and it must be transformed into love. Last week I spoke to you on how to effectively manage PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is a deeper issue than anger, in as much as you don't just remember events, but you relive them, and all of the experience of the original experience happens to you over and over again. It affects you, it affects your relationships, it affects your mental health, and until one decides to get help, that cycle will continue to repeat itself. And help came in the form of engaging others and sharing openly what was going on, telling someone your experience. It also involved group dynamics, group therapy. It also involved therapy and some forms of treatment and perhaps medication in worst case scenarios. But PTSD must be effectively managed or it will eat your soul alive. I wish I could tell you I was exaggerating. I am not. All right. Today, I want to talk to you about our need to heal. Our need to heal. So if we've recognized that we've got some anger issues and we've begun to work on them, and we have PTSD issues and we've begun to work on them, and some other things that could be holding us back, wouldn't it be a good time to admit our need to heal and actually do the things we need to do to get help to get better, to love and come alive? All right. So this one other word about love and come alive. This year is dedicated to the idea. I'm focused on writing a book that will be a practical guide for people to use who want to get out of the ruts of their lives, whatever has caused that rut, whether disappointing relationships, disappointing jobs, disappointing family, whatever that is. I want to provide a practical guide that would help people move from what feels like living dead to being fully loving and fully alive. All right. Now, today, I'm taking you back 30 years. Yes, I am more than 30 years old. Many of you who know me know that. All right, but I want to take you back 30 years. And I want to take you to a moment that happened in my life that has forever changed it. Once spending the night with a woman who was important to me. We were important to each other at the time. After our ritual with each other, celebrating our love for each other and going to sleep, I was awakened a few hours later with that woman screaming out loud. She was having an experience of a moment in her life that literally was not taking place then. And as I reached to hold her, to wake her, to help her feel secure about who she is and her environment, who I am, I began to hear this story. The story spoke of how her brother had used her for sex as a child. For the next year or two, we got to know each other. We talked, I listened, and healing began to take place in my friend in such a way that she has never looked back. But here's the intriguing part of this experience. From that moment on, it was almost as if a pivotal point in my life had taken place, and her scream was the announcement. Every woman around me, every woman who had engagement or contact or communication or conversation with me, whatever the premise was, if it was professional, if it was spiritual, if it was organizational, somewhere in the context of the conversation, the woman I was with at the moment would say, "Oscar, can I talk to you about something?" And the same story came out. And the same story continued to come out. I was once working on a contract to speak for a university. And the woman in charge of the event, I had to meet for lunch. And so, I'm well-dressed. This is a professional moment. I'm going to be talking about human relations and how to develop positive human relations at every level of personal, professional relationship. So we were having lunch. We were talking about a date and how the event would flow, because I wasn't just going to be speaking, I would also be training for a few hours. When the meeting was over, I'm a traditional guy. I get to check. I'm beginning to back away from the table to go and pay for our meal, when the lady I was talking to reached and got my coat sleeve and said, "Oscar, can I tell you one more thing?" And I heard the same story. Now, think about this. If you're a man, you're early to mid-30s, and all of a sudden women begin to tell you this story, you would have to ask yourself some questions, just as I did. I needed to know why I was being approached to learn all this information. It wasn't in my wheelhouse. It wasn't my bailiwick. It wasn't in my skill set or experience. But this had come to me, and so I was shaken about it for a bit. A woman I met in Japan a few years earlier had become my mentor. She lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and so I flew out to Phoenix, and she took me into her backyard where the fairies fly. And I told her my story, and she says, "Oscar, as smart as you are, there's some things you just don't get. Your aura, your energy, your presence says safety, love, and security, and trust. And so women, whether they're meeting you for the first time or the 50th time, are responding to that is in you, and in a safe moment, find an opportunity to share what they've never shared." And gosh, I had to sit back in my chair, because that was exactly what I needed to know. There was nothing weird about me. As a matter of fact, I was honored to learn that I might become an instrument in healing. And so I continued to listen when I got home, and women came and women came and women came, to the point that as I began to do my own research, 7 in 10 women I was meeting, or that I in fact knew, had had this experience, either sexual abuse by family members or friends of family as children, or rape as teens and adults. And so the more I began to research and the more I began to talk to women, and on different continents. So I need you to know that this issue of incest, right, and sexual violence is not consistent only in a particular demographic, in a particular part of the world. This is consistent in every nation and station of life. It doesn't matter whether wealth surrounds the family or poverty. There is something about women, children becoming victims because they're available to primarily adult men to be used for sex. Now, trust me, I don't get it. For a whole bunch of reasons I don't get it, But I was thrown in the middle of this, and I began to have to deal with it. So I began to develop a plan on how to help women heal. But I knew I needed just a whole lot of information about a lot of women in a lot of places and different occupations to begin to know what the approach might be. We're talking today about admitting the need to heal, and I'm going to come shortly and talk to you about that pivotal point in women's lives when they recognize now is the time to reveal my experience so that I can live a better life in the future than I have in the past. Hope you're getting that. All right, as I continue to do research, I did research about women who go to the military. 7 in 10 women who go to the military have had this experience before going in and likely will again while in. All right, I spoke to you last week about women who are affected by friendly fire, of individual and gang rape by other soldiers, and they are discharged because they are not taken serious for what has happened to them, and men tend to want to cover these things up when they come out. So, civilian or military, people who regard themselves spiritual and churchy, people who consider themselves unspiritual, unchurchy, atheist, agnostic, it doesn't matter. It was happening across the board. So as I began to do the research, I did establish a profile for who this woman is. And if there were a target group for this edition of the podcast, it would be women in mid-30s. And the premium year is the year age 35. Now, I want to unpack that a bit. The profile for women who have had this experience generally tends to mean by the time they're 35, can be 10 to 20 pounds overweight, 2 or more children from 2 or more marriages or long-term relationships, who drive a car that is more than 5 years old, whose education is at a height average of 2 years of college, and whose relationship experiences are not good, haven't worked out. They prove to be dysfunctional and prove to be further experiences of violence in some context, whether it is literally emotional or physical. But people who have experienced violence until they deal with what happened to them in the past may continue to attract violence later in life. So what happens with women who meet this profile? And listen, profiles, as I spoke to you before, profiles are like trends on the internet of things that are being focused on in a particular time. A profile, this profile that I've shared with you is a trend. It is merely a trend. There are many, many exceptions to the rule. A profile is established so that there is a common ground to begin to examine and investigate an issue. It is the first word. It is not the last word. Please hear that. So you may not fit the profile that I just shared with you. If you'd like to see that profile, write me at OscarCrawfordMedia@gmail.com. I'll share that profile with you further, and maybe some links to earlier podcasts I've done with women about the issue. All right. So a woman awakens at age 35 and asks herself, after a number of dysfunctional relationships, or affected by poverty or self-destructive behaviors, or continued abuse of domestic and sexual violence, ask herself, and it's not all of a sudden, but it is the point of critical mass. It is going to be engaged. It is going to be now. Changes are going to be made in her life. And so she asked herself, I wonder if the things that happened to me when I was younger have an effect on the life that I am living in the present. The answer to that is absolutely yes. And so when women come to this pivotal point, this critical mass, now, what do I do? Who do I tell? How do I get help? What I'm talking about happened to me years ago, but I literally believe it is still affecting me now. My soul is affected. I'm affected. Who can I turn to? What can I do? Well, that is the place that I want to talk to you about today, admitting the need to heal. If we don't admit that we have a need to heal, guess what? Healing is not going to happen. What you don't draw attention to will get no attention. Are you hearing me? I hope you're hearing me. What you don't draw attention to will get no attention. And that line will work for us in many other places I'll talk to you about in time to come. So the first thing women are challenged with is, who do I tell? And when women begin to talk to other women, guess what is realized really quickly? They are not alone. There are many other women who share their experience. And so one of the first opportunities women have is to talk to other women, to talk to each other, to talk about their common experience, and to talk about whether or not anyone has had any successful recovery and reoriented their lives such that their lives become more loving and productive and no longer the experience of thinking of oneself as a victim. It is now time to be a victor and no longer a victim. So the woman who is beginning to love and come alive in this mid-30s moment, guess what she's not about to do? She is no longer available to the mess men and others have brought to her, because she's no longer available to that kind of disrespect or treatment. Now, what that might mean for some when the awakening takes place, there could be a man in their life at the moment who lives with them out of a connection of disrespect and mistreatment. You may have to leave that person. You may have to learn how to defend yourself. Now, when women go to extremes to manage the things that are happening to them, you have heard of the movie The Burning Bed. And I really, really, really am grateful that there have been a number of films and books written. But here's what really tends to happen, or has happened before 35. Women don't talk about this. They don't even talk to each other about this. They talk about their men, their kids, the things that excite them, what they're going to do, vocation and whatnot. But because it has been such a secret held on to for so long, it is not talked about. But once that dynamic critical mass moment comes, women open up and begin to talk. This was what was so strange for me. Women weren't opening up and talking to women, but women were talking to me. And in the process, I hope you can hear this from my heart, I learned to speak woman. Oscar, God, what does that mean? When I say I learned to speak woman, it meant, as some women will know, there are women who are exceptions to this rule too. Women tend to be a great deal more expressive in the use of descriptive language than men. Here's another piece for you. Women on average speak 50,000 words in a day. Okay, so if it's not you, I'm not talking to you, okay? On average, women speak 50,000 words in a day. Men speak 20,000 words on average in a day. I hope you can see the challenge that can present just because of the difference in the way that we approach life. Women are much more descriptive of feeling experiences. If you ask a man, hey, dude, what y'all have for lunch? We got a burger. Ask a woman what she had for lunch. She will tell you who she was with. She will tell you what everybody wore. She would tell you what the wait service was like. She would tell you what the food was like. You can almost taste it from the description. And the relational connection is so full that you really feel like you were inside the experience as it was being shared with you. Man, what'd you have for lunch? We had a burger. And that's it. One of the things that I had to realize as I was maturing to be an adult man was the men that I knew wanted to talk about cars or sports when I knew that wasn't their primary agenda. But so that men don't let it out what's not happening in their life. Talk about cars, talk about sports. And so I was on Laguna Beach some years ago with a team that I was part of. And Laguna Beach is an interesting place. Fabulous place. There's wealth in Laguna Beach. Houses hang off the side of mountains on stilts. And really attractive people come to the beach. And so I had no interest in cars or sports while on Laguna Beach. I was trying to see who I could meet, who I could get to know, what kind of conversation I could have. I wanted to learn about some of the people who were there. And many of them were just like us. They were traveling as well. All right, so when we talk about how women begin to recover, one of the first things, women, I'm suggesting to you, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm suggesting for your consideration that once you have begun to recover on purpose, you on purpose intend to recover, you are not going to be the same woman people have taken for granted and used prior to the now. You're going to become the woman who whoever engages you has the benefit of sharing you with you. That is going to come as a result of negotiation and your fully informed choice to say yes or not, right? So when you awaken to know that you have choices on how to live your life, life becomes different. It doesn't become sadder. It doesn't have you sitting off to the side feeling alone. You are now ready to engage life at another level. All right. When women begin to talk about what has happened to them in their lives, and women begin to realize that they are not the only woman affected, and women realize that they have some new choices for their lives, the admission of the need to heal is fully engaged. So one of the things that I've discovered is that women who are victims tend to pour out all of their lives for people who are good for them, and I'm talking about human and natural resources. I have met women who gave all of their money to the person that they were involved with, even to the point that they were doing without things necessary for life for themselves or their family. No, I didn't understand that, but it wasn't mine to understand. It was mine to accept and begin to engage women right where they are. Now, I want to give you another example. I knew a woman once who had invited me to share an evening with her, a night. And when I got there, I had been in a very social setting and had a few drinks. Now, please hear me clearly. The only thing I had in mind was intimacy at such a comfortable, exciting level, empowerment floodgates turn on. But when I spoke that to her, she recoiled in fear, and I quickly needed to say, oh my God, whatever you're seeing, whatever you're remembering, it is not me. Take a moment, get a breath. Whatever you're experiencing all over again, I'm not that experience. I'm not that person. I'm not that part of your past. Look again. It's Oscar standing over here, excited to see you, but that for the moment, let's find a way to get you in a good place. So what I'm saying to you now is your relationships to come must be premised upon people who literally care about you. Now, I know, women, I know you have this biological demon just like men have. There are women that I've counseled and worked with over the years who would say to me, but Oscar, you don't understand. Late at night, my vagina talks to me. It drives me crazy. I get it. We all go through that. I don't care what age and stage you are in your life. If that has been a trend for your behavior and a trend for your makeup, that ain't going away anytime soon. What you have to do is become mature enough to manage it and not let it manage you. Because if you let that manage you, you will do some crazy things with some crazy people, wake up the next day and hate yourself for having done it again, and your recovery has been put off to a later date. I'm talking to all of you who are ready to admit that you need to heal, that you want to get the help necessary to become the person you dreamed about being but never found a path to do that. So categorically, I'm saying to you, you must now begin to talk differently, posture yourself differently with the intention to rebuild and reform your person in such a way that you love yourself, you are good for yourself, and beneficial in your relationships. I hope that's making sense to you. Okay, so after talking, what might help? Well, the past has always asked us, past help has always asked us to journal our experience so we can get it out of ourselves and flush it. That is exactly what we do when we go to the bathroom. We go to the bathroom to either clean ourselves or eliminate from our bodies what is no longer necessary. And so while we will always have the memory of this experience, we do not want the influence of this experience taking us in directions we don't want to go. So I will leave it to you whether you believe it important to write out your story. But I must tell you, the more you give attention to your story, the more likely you are to reproduce your story. Once you have had this conversation with women, and even if you decide to continue that conversation in a way that's beneficial to other women, I salute you, I honor you, I love you for that respect you've developed for yourself. But understand that when you're telling your story afterwards, you're telling your story for the benefit of others and not for the sake of repeating your record over and over and over again. You do not need to hear that. You do not need to feel that. If you've decided to move on in your life, move on. Don't let anybody pull you back in the past. Oh, girl, I remember you used to tell me so-and-so used to do this to you. Forget, if you have friends that only want to keep you mired in the past, love them enough to allow them to be any place you are not. I'm going to go so far as to say even your family. If your family wants to keep you stuck in the past, remembering your dysfunction and your inability, and you were the person everybody in the family felt sorry for, when you have awakened to love and come alive, if they can't move with you, allow them to be anywhere you are not. I hope you're getting that. All right, so whatever has happened to you, whatever's happened to you in your life, whether it was your brother or your daddy or your uncle, your grandpa, maybe your mama or your auntie, whoever it was, this is the hard part. When you can get to this part, you will become so free. You will no longer allow the thought of persons affect you. Now, this is not magic. This will take a little time. Healing always takes time. If you fall and hurt a bone, it takes time to heal, right? If you cut yourself, you've got to take a bit of time to heal. Emotionally, it's going to take a bit of time to heal, but your decision is in the moment, and you're not going to allow yourself to be pulled back into the past. So anything, anybody that wants to pull you back into the past, deliver them to be wherever they are. Now, the point I'm getting to, the hard part, forgiveness is not for the person you need to forgive. I'm not telling you it will be easy, but I am categorically saying to you it is a must. Forgiveness is, and I'm not selling you on this, forgiveness does not mean forgetting. I have no idea where that nonsense comes from. I'm certain it has come from some religious source where people spout it off because they think it's the right thing to say. I am not asking you or suggesting to you that you need to forget. I am clearly saying to you, you need to forgive, and not for the benefit of others, but for your own. So whoever has harmed you, doesn't mean you got to keep seeing them either. They don't have to always be in your face, and you don't have to want them to be, and your decisions are yours. And you don't even have to do it in their presence. But you need to have a ceremony to yourself, write their name on a piece of paper, and maybe write the infraction or whatever they did to you on that piece of paper, and put it in the fire, and speak to yourself while the fire is burning and smoke is going toward the sky, and say, I forgive the persons who have harmed me because I want to live a better life for myself. I'm no longer going to fall into this black hole of self-pity and anger and resentment. I am going to move on, live a better life. I'm going to love and come alive. I'm going to love and be productive. I'm going to be an asset to myself first, and I'm going to be an asset to all my relationships. If I'm a parent, I'm going to be a better mom. If I'm a lover, I'm going to be a better lover because I'm bringing all of myself to the experience. I'm no longer chained to the past, and I'm going to live a life that is exciting to me, and I'm going to be happy. Now, happy, remember I said to you, happy is not some euphoric condition that lasts. Love you made yesterday won't work today. You're going to want to do some things again today that will bring that experience of happiness back to you. Okay, I'm out of time. I got to go, but ladies, please hear me. Talk to your friends. Share this podcast with your friends who need to hear it. Admit that you need to heal if you need to heal. Now, for all of you who this has not been your experience, I am so thankful for you that you have not had this experience. 7 in 10 women around you, and maybe more, have. Initiate a conversation. Help people love and come alive. give yourself to this and help people get out of the pain of their past so that they can live a life that's loving and productive and feels good to be alive with gratitude. Thanks again for joining me. This was the Love and Come Alive podcast. I'm Oscar Crawford. Until next time.